Hey, I'm Lauren, and let me tell you something. My family tried everything to ruin my career. They went as far as to manipulate me, steal my inheritance, and push me out of everything I built. But here's the twist. They never saw it coming. While they thought they were controlling me, I was secretly taking over their $620 million company. But why would a family do that to one of their own? What drives them to tear each other apart for power? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And by the way, where are you listening from today? Let me know. I was never the one to grab the spotlight. I was fine with my quiet, unnoticed existence, successful in my own right, but always playing second fiddle to my brother, Brian. My life was methodical, predictable, until that moment, everything shifted. I'm Lauren, Chief Strategy Officer at Everland Dynamics, a mid-level corporate soldier in a family of businessmen. My father, a figurehead of industry, and my mother, always proud of my brother's charm and salesmanship. Brian, my golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. I never minded. I had my job, my work, and that was enough. But the walls were starting to crack. A subtle discomfort buzzed under my skin. I wasn't oblivious. I could sense it. Something was off. It was small at first. A glance here, a quiet comment there, like tiny echoes of something darker beneath the surface. Brian's interests seemed to be aligning more with mine. Too much for comfort. One afternoon, as I scanned through the morning's emails, a small detail caught my eye. Something strange in the way Brian was suddenly so interested in our company's strategic developments. He was always a salesman, never the strategist. So why was he so involved? I brushed it off, until it became harder to ignore. The day I realized what was happening, I wasn't prepared. The first betrayal came in whispers, small but undeniably significant. I was in the boardroom when Brian made his move, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of our senior executives. A rumor began to spread that I wasn't capable of leading. It was subtle, wrapped in the form of concern. But I knew. He was maneuvering, trying to outflank me. I couldn't believe it. My own brother, working behind my back to sabotage me. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but I refused to let it stop me. I had worked too hard, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me, not even family. It didn't take long for me to uncover the truth. Brian had been secretly shifting company shares behind my back. The evidence was there, an email thread that was meant for his business partners, people I considered rivals. He had been building alliances with my competition. It felt like the ground beneath me was shifting, but I didn't falter. Anger surged in me, yes, but beneath it, something else stirred. Determination. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. Number I was going to take control, reclaim what was mine. I could feel it deep in my bones. I was going to play this game, and I would win. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a family dinner, supposedly a chance to mend some of the cracks between us. But as I sat there, watching my parents fawn over Brian and dismiss my every word, it became clear they were never going to see me the way they saw him. "You know," my mother said with a slight laugh, "Brian has always had a way of making people feel at ease. Unlike you, dear." Her words stung, but what really hurt was the look on my father's face, the pride in his eyes as he nodded, agreeing with her. Brian's smile was too knowing, too triumphant. He was the family's favorite. I had nothing left here, nothing except the ambition I had nurtured in secret. That night, as I lay in bed, something shifted in me. I wasn't going to beg for their approval. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at the table that was never meant for me. No, I was going to take what was mine. I had the power, and I was going to use it. I started small, quietly, with the kind of precision that only someone in my position could achieve. I began to gather my own allies, executives who had seen through Brian's charm and were waiting for someone to challenge him. I was ready. I had the resources, the knowledge, and the drive. All I needed was the right moment. That moment came sooner than I expected. I made my first move. Subtle, unnoticed by Brian. I began to purchase shares in Everlyn Dynamics through a private trust. A few here, a few there. Enough to give me leverage, enough to secure my place in the company without anyone noticing. The tension was thick, palpable. The day would come soon, I could feel it, when Brian would finally realize that the game had changed. When he would learn that I had been quietly building my empire while he had been too focused on taking mine. But I wasn't done yet. The email arrived late that night, just as I had finished reviewing my plans for the next phase. A notification pinged on my phone, a message from my trusted financial advisor. Brian had intensified his efforts. He had successfully swayed a few key figures in the company. The endgame was closing in, and I had to act fast. As I stared at the email, a knot twisted in my stomach. The realization hit me all at once. This was no longer just about business. It was personal. It was family. And the game was on. The evening felt heavier than usual as I walked into my parents' home. The familiar smell of my mother's cooking wafted through the air, but it didn't comfort me like it used to. This was no longer a place of refuge. The walls of this house now felt like they were closing in, each corner reminding me of the betrayal that had been brewing for weeks. Brian was already there, sitting at the head of the dining table, chatting with our parents like he was the king of the house. I could see the way he effortlessly held their attention, the way my father laughed at his jokes, the way my mother nodded approvingly at every word. As always, they favored him, and I felt like a ghost in my own home. "Lauren, you're here!" Brian greeted me with a too-wide smile, his voice dripping with something I couldn't quite place. Was it mockery? Or something more sinister? I managed a tight smile in return, my hands suddenly feeling cold. I sat down, trying to ignore the way my parents exchanged looks, those subtle glances that spoke volumes. Brian was their favorite. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Me? I was always just the background character in their perfect family story. Dinner went on with the usual back and forth, but the tension between us was palpable. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't the food that made me lose my appetite. It was the way my parents treated me like I was invisible, and how Brian made little, cutting remarks about my career. "Lauren's still sticking to that strategy position at Everlyn, huh?" he said, a mockingly casual tone in his voice. "I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the type of thing that, well, actually matters in the real world, right?" I could feel my blood start to boil, but I swallowed my frustration. If I snapped now, I'd just confirm every terrible thing he'd said about me. Instead, I focused on breathing, on trying to hold it together. My parents didn't even flinch at his comments. It was like they didn't even hear the passive-aggressive barbs that cut deep. "Brian, you're right," I said, trying to match his tone with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It's not like building a business or leading a team is hard work. But hey, everyone has their own way of achieving success, don't they?" The words were out before I could stop them, and I felt the heat of their sting on my tongue. My father cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation in another direction, but the damage had been done. Brian's smug smile only widened. Then, as if to add fuel to the fire, my father made a remark that sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Lauren's got her hands full, I suppose," Walter said, almost dismissively, as he passed the salad around. "But I think she's starting to realize the importance of family connections, don't you think, Carla?" I froze, feeling like the ground beneath me had just shifted. My father's comment wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. "You're right, Walter," my mother chimed in, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Brian's always been so good at navigating the corporate world. He knows how to make the right moves, like getting the right partners on board. Maybe Lauren should take a page out of his book." The hurt was almost too much to bear. This was my family, my parents, throwing me under the bus to praise Brian. I could feel my chest tighten as the walls of my world started to crumble. How could they not see what he was doing to me? How could they stand by him while he was quietly trying to sabotage me? The moment the words left their mouths, I realized something. I wasn't just a victim of Brian's actions anymore. This was a fight for my place in my family, a fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But my heart sank as I realized how deep the divide went. It wasn't just Brian who was betraying me, it was all of them. That's when it happened. My father, in a slip of the tongue, revealed my deepest secret. I don't know if Lauren ever mentioned it, but she's been quietly involved with the corporate side of Everlyn. She's got a stake in the company now, you know. A significant one. Walter's voice was casual, but the words hit me like a slap to the face. The room fell silent. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel my face flush with embarrassment. Why hadn't I told them? Why hadn't I shared my plans with my parents? But what hurt more was how they reacted. There was no pride in their eyes, no recognition of my hard work. Instead, they looked at me like I had done something wrong, like I had betrayed them in some way. Brian's eyes glinted with malice. He knew. He had always known. And now the entire family knew. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand to be in that room anymore. I excused myself, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I stormed into the hallway, my hands shaking. What? The quiet hum of my office was almost too loud in the stillness of the night. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type. I couldn't. My mind was racing. The dinner with my family had left me with a bitter taste, the sting of betrayal still fresh in my chest. How could they? How could Brian twist everything so effortlessly? And how could my parents stand by, acting as though nothing was wrong? I had always been the responsible one, the one who did everything right, the one who never rocked the boat. But that dinner had made it clear. Everything I had done, all the years of hard work, were nothing in their eyes. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter anymore. I was the scapegoat, the one to blame for everything that went wrong. And Brian? He wasn't content to just sabotage me in the corporate world. No. He had to manipulate my parents too. Make sure they saw me as the failure and him as the golden child. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't let him win. Not like this. Not after everything I had worked for. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it, and my heart skipped a beat. The subject line read, Future Collaboration, Meeting Confirmed. The Investor. I hesitated for a moment before opening the email. It was short, direct. Let's meet tomorrow at noon in the city. I'll have my assistant send you the details. We have much to discuss. A wave of anticipation washed over me. This could be it, my chance to take control back. But as the excitement surged, so did the fear. What if I failed? What if this didn't work out, and I ended up deeper in the hole? The stakes were higher than ever, and there was no turning back now. I stood up, pacing my office as the weight of the decision settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about my career anymore. This was about proving to myself that I could win, that I could fight for everything I'd earned. But more than that, it was about my family. It was about showing them that they couldn't just throw me aside without consequences. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. This was my moment. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. As I gathered my things, I glanced at the clock. It was late, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. I wasn't going to waste time worrying about Brian or my parents' disapproval. Tomorrow was the day everything would change. The next morning, I was up early, my nerves buzzing in my chest. I dressed carefully, choosing something that said I was serious, no more playing it safe, no more blending in. I was ready to take what was mine. I arrived at the meeting place, a quiet cafe in downtown Seattle, with minutes to spare. My hands were shaking as I pushed open the door. Inside, a man was already waiting, sitting at a corner table, looking every bit the part of a seasoned corporate investor. He stood up when he saw me, offering a firm handshake. "Lauren, it's good to meet you in person," he said, his voice low but welcoming. I smiled tightly, shaking his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know this is a bit unconventional," He chuckled. Unconventional doesn't scare me. Let's talk about your future. We sat down, and the conversation began. The investor, whose name was Richard, didn't waste any time. He got straight to the point. He was interested in what I had to offer, but there was a catch. He wanted control. He wanted a stake in Everland Dynamics in exchange for his backing. I wasn't surprised. I had expected this. But hearing the words aloud made the reality hit home. This was a game changer. The power shift was imminent. If I accepted his offer, everything would change. I'd have the leverage I needed, but at what cost? As we discussed the terms, my mind raced. Richard wasn't offering a simple partnership. This was a full-on corporate takeover. But the way he spoke about it, as though it were the only option, made it clear that this was my chance. This was the only way I could fight back, the only way to ensure my place in the company, my place in the family. The conversation felt surreal, like I was watching someone else make the decisions. But the reality was clear. I was making the moves now. Not Brian, not my parents. It was me. When the meeting wrapped up, Richard stood, shaking my hand again. We'll move forward, but you know the stakes. You're not just fighting for a company. You're fighting for your future. I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. My future. That was what this was about now. I walked out of the cafe with a new sense of determination. The battle had just begun, and I wasn't about to let anyone take what was mine. Not Brian, not my parents, and certainly not anyone else who thought they could control my fate. The day wasn't over yet, but it felt like I had already crossed a line I couldn't come back from. There was no going back now. As I stepped into my car, my phone buzzed again. It was an email from Brian. The SU? The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual as I sat alone in my home office. The pile of documents on the desk before me, a silent reminder of everything I was about to uncover. My mind was a whirlwind of anger and confusion, but a strange sense of clarity was beginning to settle in. It wasn't just about family anymore. It was about power, and I was finally seeing the depth of Brian's betrayal. I hadn't realized how deep it went until now. All these years, I thought I was merely overlooked, undervalued. But it wasn't just that. Brian had been undermining me from the very beginning, playing a game of manipulation that was so subtle, so calculated, I never saw it coming. My success had always been met with doubt, my every move questioned, while Brian was hailed as the golden child. But it wasn't just personal, it was corporate, and now I had the evidence to prove it. I flipped through the old financial documents, my fingers trembling slightly as I read each one. Something wasn't right. The numbers didn't add up, and there were discrepancies I couldn't ignore. It was clear now. Brian had been forging documents, manipulating key figures, and altering financial records to secure his control over the company's assets. My heart raced as I realized the extent of his deception. He hadn't just been undermining me, he had been planning this all along. I felt sick to my stomach. All these years, I had trusted him. I had trusted my family, but they had all been in on it, knowingly or unknowingly. Brian had created an intricate web of lies, and now I was finally seeing it for what it was. I quickly gathered the documents and made copies, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on me. This wasn't just a matter of family betrayal. It was a full-scale corporate war. Sitting back in my chair, I let out a long breath. The anger was boiling inside me, but there was no time to waste. I had to act. I had to confront Brian, and I had to do it now. I scheduled the meeting for the next day, knowing it would be the moment everything changed. I had the proof, the ammunition. Now, I just had to take him down. But as I sat there, preparing for the confrontation, doubt crept in. Was I ready for this? Could I really stand face to face with him and expose everything? I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to center myself. I had come this far. I wasn't going to back down now. I wasn't just fighting for the company. I was fighting for my life, my future, my identity. This wasn't just about power. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The next day, I met Brian in the conference room. I could feel the tension in the air as soon as I walked in. He was sitting at the head of the table, looking too calm, too collected. The man who had been orchestrating this whole charade. I wasted no time. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with an edge of anger. "I know what you've been doing." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "What are you talking about?" His voice was smooth, casual, as though he wasn't worried at all. I slapped the documents on the table in front of him. "These. You've been forging company documents, manipulating the financials, trying to take over everything." His eyes flickered, but he quickly recovered, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You're imagining things, Lauren. These are just misunderstandings. It's not what you think." I leaned forward, the anger rising in my chest. "Don't play games with me, Brian. I have proof. I know what you've done. You've been undermining me for years, and now you've gone too far." He leaned back in his chair, looking unfazed. "I did what was necessary to protect the family business," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I was looking out for everyone. You just don't understand." I wanted to scream, to lash out at him, but I kept my composure. "You're a liar. You've been playing everyone, manipulating them into believing you're the one who's right, but not anymore." Brian's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading. "You think you can win this? You think you can take me down?" I stood up, my heart pounding. "You've already lost," I said, my voice cold. "This is over." The confrontation had left me exhausted, emotionally drained, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer afraid of Brian, no longer afraid of losing. I had everything I needed to take control back. Later that night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the stack of documents I had gathered. The weight of everything I had just done was heavy, but I knew it was the right choice. The decision was made. I wasn't just going to expose Brian, I was going to take back what was mine. As I prepared to take the next steps, I received a call. It was the investor, the one I had reached out to. "Lauren," the voice on the other end said, "we're ready to move forward, but there's a price. You'll need to make a decision, and it won't be easy." I hung up the phone, my heart racing. The office was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of paper as I flipped through the pile of documents in front of me. The weight of the situation was pressing down on me, a constant reminder that this was far from over. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. The financial ultimatum from Brian and the other shareholders was more than just an inconvenience. It was a direct attack on everything I had worked for. It wasn't just the money they were asking for. It was my control, my power, my future. They were trying to break me, and I wasn't sure I could hold up under the pressure. As I stared at the numbers on the page, I could feel the anxiety creeping in. They were giving me an impossible choice: pay the sum they demanded or risk losing everything. I knew they were testing me, pushing me to see how far they could go before I cracked. But there was no way I was going to give in. I couldn't. Not now. I let out a breath, staring at the ceiling as I tried to gather my thoughts. Brian and the shareholders were playing a dangerous game, and I had no intention of being a pawn. I'd spent my whole life fighting for my place in this company, and I wasn't about to let them take it away from me. I knew this was bigger than just a financial battle. It was about power, and I wasn't going to let them win. But as I sat there, the reality of what I was facing hit me. I wasn't just up against Brian anymore. I was up against an entire system that had been built to keep people like me down. It was a game of corporate politics, and I was caught in the middle. The stakes had never been higher, and I had never felt more alone. Brian wasn't backing down. His threats were becoming more pointed, more personal. The legal jargon he tossed around had made it clear that they weren't just trying to intimidate me. They were trying to bankrupt me, emotionally and financially. The pressure was immense, but the thought of giving in made me feel sick. I had worked too hard to let it slip away now. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer's number. This was no longer a matter of family betrayal. It was war. The call rang once, twice, before my lawyer picked up. "Lauren," he said, his voice steady, "what's the situation?" They want money, I said, my voice tight. A lot of it. And if I don't pay, they'll take legal action. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a deep sigh. It's what I expected. You need to be prepared for this. It's not just about the money. They're trying to force you out. They want you to cave in. You can't let them see you break. I clenched my jaw, determination flooding my veins. I won't. I'm not backing down, but I need a plan. A real one. I'll start looking over the financials. We'll find a way to fight this. As we talked, I felt a shift within me. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't alone. I had the resources, the legal backing, and the determination to fight back. I had spent years building this company, earning my place, and I wasn't going to let Brian take it away. The next day, things escalated. Brian's demands grew more insistent, and the pressure from the shareholders became unbearable. They kept pushing, sending letters filled with legal threats, trying to intimidate me into submission. But all it did was fuel my resolve. I wasn't going to fold. Not now. Not ever. By the time I sat down with my legal team later that evening, I had a plan. A strategic counterattack. I wasn't going to wait for them to make the first move anymore. I would make it. I've hired a forensic accountant, I said, looking at my lawyer. We're going to dig into the company's financial records. If they're going to make this about money, then we're going to turn it on them. My lawyer's eyebrows raised in approval. Good move. This could give us the leverage we need. We need to hit them hard, I said, feeling the weight of the situation settling over me. They think they can break me with money, but I'll show them just how much power I really have. As the days passed, the tension only increased. Every phone call, every email, every meeting felt like a battle. The walls were closing in, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready. One evening, as I worked late into the night, organizing the financial documents and preparing my case, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Marcus, the investor I'd reached out to earlier in the week. He had agreed to meet with me. I couldn't help the small surge of hope that washed over me. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, the moment that could change everything. But as I glanced at the clock, I knew the real battle was just beginning. The pressure was mounting, and the fight was far from over. I had a choice to make: take the risk and fight for my future, or walk away and let them win. I wasn't about to let them win. The next chapter of my life was about to begin, and there was no turning back now. The sound of the rain against the window was the only thing that filled the silence as I stood in my living room, staring out into the dark Seattle night. My mind was heavy, weighed down by everything that had happened. My family, the betrayal, the lies. And now Brian was back, standing in front of me asking for forgiveness. I didn't flinch. I didn't even react. His apology felt hollow, empty. It was the same old story, his regret, his remorse, but it all felt so wrong. I crossed my arms, the cool air from the window against my skin, and waited for him to finish speaking. He looked sincere enough, but I knew better. "Lauren, I made a mistake," Brian said, his voice softer now. "I've been thinking about everything, and I realize how much I hurt you. I never wanted to put you in this position. I was wrong." I glanced at him, my eyes cold. "You were wrong," I repeated, my voice flat. "But your mistake wasn't just about your actions. It was about everything you did to me, to this family, to the company." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Stop." I held up my hand, cutting him off. "You've said this before, Brian. You always say you're sorry, but it's always the same, empty words. You don't get to apologize for what you've done." His face twisted in confusion. "Lauren, I'm just trying to make things right. I know I can help. I can help you with the company, with the finances. I want to fix this." His words were like a slap. "Fix this?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You can't fix anything, Brian. Not after everything. Not after what you've done to me." He stepped back, his expression faltering. "What do you want from me then?" "What do I want?" I took a deep breath, forcing the anger down. I want you to leave. I want you to stay away. I don't want your help. I don't need your manipulation anymore. I see right through it. He shook his head, frustration creeping into his voice. You're making a mistake. I'm trying to protect you. I've always been looking out for you, Lauren. You've never been looking out for me, I said, my voice steady but sharp. You've always been looking out for yourself. And now you want me to believe that you've had a change of heart? That you're sorry? It's too late for that. There was a long silence between us, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Brian opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. I could see it in his eyes. He was angry, yes, but more than that, he was desperate. And it only made me stronger. Don't bother, Brian. I've heard enough, I said, turning away from him. I'm done, and so is this conversation. His voice followed me as I walked to the door. Lauren, please. No, I'm done, I repeated, my voice firm. I opened the door and stood there, waiting for him to leave. I didn't look back. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me, and then, without another word, he turned and walked out. As the door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled, feeling the weight in my chest slowly begin to lift. The door closed on him, and it felt like the end of an era. But it wasn't just the end of my relationship with Brian. It was the end of me letting him or anyone else control me. I had to let go of the past, of all the manipulation, all the lies. I was done. As I stood there, staring at the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be some form of apology or last-ditch effort from Brian. But instead, it was a message from Marcus. He'd agreed to meet with me. I sat down at my desk, my fingers hovering over the screen. It was finally happening. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I'd spent so long planning, strategizing, and now it was all falling into place. But there was one more decision to make. The call from Marcus meant everything was about to change, and I needed to decide if I was willing to risk it all. To take on Brian, my family, and the company in a way I hadn't even considered before. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the message on my phone. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm. I was no longer just reacting. I was in control. The storm had been raging for so long, but now it felt like it was finally starting to settle. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. The phone buzzed again. It was Marcus, confirming our meeting for the next morning. The future was calling, and this time I was ready. The courtroom was quiet, but the tension was thick, like the heavy fog that clung to Seattle's streets outside. I could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure building in my chest as the opposing lawyers exchanged cold glances. The faces of my family and the company's board members stared back at me, each one holding a different expression, but none of them held the truth. I had spent weeks preparing for this. The stakes were higher than ever. My career, my future, and the power to reclaim everything I had worked for were all in this room. Every word spoken, every move I made from here on out would decide the rest of my life. The first thing I had to do was shut out the noise. They were trying to break me, and they would if I let them. Ms. Carter, are you prepared to accept the terms of the settlement? Or are you insisting on dragging this matter further? The lawyer for the board spoke, his voice measured, yet laced with an undercurrent of menace. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. I'm not interested in your settlement, I said, my voice unwavering. Not when it's built on lies. I could see it in their eyes, the disbelief, the growing frustration. But there was no turning back now. I had made my decision. This wasn't just a fight for my career. It was a fight for my soul. Brian, sitting on the other side of the courtroom, barely looked up. His presence was still there, silent but looming. I could see the guilt buried beneath his indifferent expression, but I also saw his desperation. He knew what I knew. If I won this, his empire would crumble, and everything he had done would be exposed for the world to see. I watched the tension shift in the room as my lawyer presented the documents I had collected. evidence of manipulation, forged contracts, and illegal activities. This was the culmination of my plan. My heart raced, but my hands remained steady. I had the upper hand, and I knew it. The cross-examination came next. It was time to face Brian. When he took the stand, I couldn't help but notice how much he had changed, physically and emotionally. He looked older, more beaten down, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of pity for him. But it quickly vanished when he began to speak. "Lauren, I made mistakes," he said, his voice full of feigned sorrow. "I was trying to protect the company. I thought it was the only way to keep everything together." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned forward, looking him dead in the eyes. "Trying to protect the company? Or trying to protect yourself, Brian?" His face tightened. "You don't understand. This was never personal. I did what I thought was right." "No, Brian. You did what was best for you. You always have." I felt the anger bubble up, but I kept it controlled. "You took what was mine, manipulated the system, and now you're trying to act like you were the hero in all this." His eyes shifted, and for a brief moment, I saw something like fear flash across his face. "You can't prove all of this." "Can I?" I smirked, pulling out a key piece of evidence. "The forgeries, the secret deals, these documents say otherwise." I could see the room shift, the board members looking at each other in panic as the truth began to settle in. Brian tried to recover, but the damage was done. His walls were crumbling, and I wasn't going to let him rebuild them. The next few hours felt like a blur. My lawyer fought fiercely, but the outcome was clear. My evidence was irrefutable. The board could no longer ignore the truth, and when the judge finally ruled in my favor, I felt a weight lift from my chest that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. As the proceedings came to a close, I left the courtroom with my head held high. But as soon as I stepped outside, I felt a familiar buzz in my pocket. It was Marcus. I glanced at the message. He was offering his support, and not just for the fight ahead. He had information that could help me secure my future. But as I stood there, staring at my phone, the weight of what had just happened settled in. I had won. But at what cost? I walked away from the courthouse, not yet knowing the full extent of what was coming next. The war was far from over, but at least for today, I had taken the first step toward reclaiming everything I had lost. The air in the room was thick, heavy with expectation. The press conference was set, and as I stood in front of the gathered media, I could feel the weight of every camera lens trained on me. This was it, the moment where everything would change. My hands trembled slightly, but I steadied myself. I knew what I had to do. The room fell silent as I took a deep breath and began speaking. "For years, you've been told a lie. The company you all think belongs to the Carter family actually belongs to me." There was a collective gasp from the crowd, and for a moment, it felt like the world itself held its breath. I continued, revealing the truth about my stake in Everland Dynamics, exposing how Brian and my parents had controlled the narrative, presenting themselves as the rightful owners when, in fact, I was the one who had built it all. I am the true owner of this company. I've worked for it, invested in it, and shaped it into what it is today. The look of shock on the faces of my family was priceless. My parents, who had always dismissed me as the black sheep, looked like they had just seen a ghost. Brian, standing beside them, appeared frozen in place, his face pale. This was the moment I had waited for, the moment I could finally set the record straight. I could feel a surge of triumph inside me, but it was quickly followed by a sharp sting of anger. The betrayal had cut so deep, not just from Brian, but from my entire family. They had treated me like an outsider, and now the truth was finally out. The media exploded with questions, cameras flashing, but I didn't let it overwhelm me. I had prepared for this. My voice remained steady as I spoke, each word measured. I knew the repercussions of this revelation, but I was ready. Brian manipulated the board, manipulated you all into believing something that wasn't true. He did this for his own gain, and for years I've been kept in the shadows while he played his games. Brian's face contorted with anger, and for a split second, I saw something more. Fear. He knew this would break him. This was the end of his power play. Then, as the room buzzed with noise, a thought hit me. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about everything. The power dynamics, the lies, the years of manipulation. It was all about to come crashing down. But then I uncovered something I wasn't expecting. As the media pressed on, asking more questions about Brian's involvement, I sifted through the documents in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Brian had been used too. He wasn't just a villain in this story. He was a pawn, manipulated by someone even more powerful. 16 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But now I saw the bigger picture. Brian wasn't the mastermind. He was a product of something darker. And I had to wonder, did he even realize how much he'd been used? A mix of anger and pity settled within me. It was hard to reconcile the person I once called my brother with the man who had betrayed me so thoroughly. Still, the truth about him being manipulated didn't change anything. It didn't excuse his actions, but it gave me a new understanding of the situation. I couldn't waste time pondering that. The clock was ticking, and the legal and personal war wasn't over. Later that evening, my family came to confront me. They were furious, demanding answers, accusing me of destroying the family. I stood there, calm and composed, knowing they had no control over me anymore. "You don't get to control me anymore," I said firmly, looking each one of them in the eye. "What you did to me, it ends now." My father, typically the one to back Brian, looked stunned. My mother, silent, had no words left. The tension was palpable, but I could feel the shift. This time, I wasn't the one being manipulated. It was their turn to face the consequences. I knew I would never be part of their world again. They were no longer my family in the way they once were. They had stripped me of my power for so long that I couldn't ever go back. But that was fine. I had something far more valuable now: control over my own life. Later that night, I received a call from Marcus. He had information, key information that could change everything. I listened intently as he explained that there were new allies, new options on the table. The battle for Everlyn was far from over, but now I wasn't alone. I hung up the phone, feeling a new sense of resolve. The battle lines had been drawn, but this time I had a strategy. I would take back my company, my life. And if my family stood in my way again, they would be nothing more than another obstacle to overcome. With the dawn of a new day, I stepped into my office, my eyes set on the future. There was no turning back now. I had made my choice, and this time I would win. As I stand here today, having conquered what seemed insurmountable, I want to leave you with a message. Life isn't about avoiding the storms. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. There will always be moments that test you, family betrayals, heartbreaks, and challenges that feel impossible to overcome. But remember, you are stronger than you think. The only way to truly move forward is by taking control of your own destiny, standing up for what you believe in, and never letting anyone define your worth. This journey has taught me the power of resilience, the importance of self-belief, and the strength to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. So ask yourself, what's holding you back from taking control of your life? What's your next step? If you found something in this story that resonates with you, if it sparked a thought or inspired you in any way, drop a comment below or hit 1 if you're ready to take that first step towards reclaiming your own power. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on future stories, and let me know where you're watching from. If you didn't like the video, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what could be better, and please share where you've seen this video. Stay strong, stay fearless, and take charge of your future.